All right, so we're going to talk about the thesis presentation and what goes into your presentation. And ultimately, when you do an oral presentation about your research, you're giving the reader a sample of what the full paper looks like. Now, the full paper might be 30 pages, 40 pages long, right? But you want to treat the thesis presentation or any oral presentation almost as if you went into 16 handles or Baskin Robbins and you're not sure which ice cream you want. You're not sure which froyo you want. So typically, before you do that, you ask for a sample cup. And you sample the froyo, you sample the ice cream, and then you decide if you want that flavor. So all oral presentations are miniature versions of the paper, and it's supposed to give a flavor of what you did. It's not, you're not going to report everything you did in an oral presentation. So let's go through it. So this is basically the title page. And on the title page where it says thesis presentation, that's your full title from your manuscript. So whatever your full title was, that's your that's where that goes. So for now, I have placeholders here to kind of talk about it. So you have your full title, and then the name of the presenter, that would be you. So framing the problems. When you do this, these are your thesis paragraphs. You may remember from last semester, we talked about thesis paragraphs. So what is the purpose of the research, right? So the purpose of this research is to ... That sentence should be the first thing you say in the PowerPoint. And then afterwards, you're going to add relevant information regarding deaths, dollars, and disabilities. You may recall the 3Ds from last semester. Then you're going to talk about your applicable theories. By the way, you have all of this. You have all of this because you did this, right? You did this last semester. So your applicable theories, here's an example of a theory. You would state what the theory is, social identity theory. Then you would cite the authors, the creators of the theory, and then you would explain what that theory is. Because do not assume the reader understands that theory. And then once you talk about that theory, you want to apply it to your study. Now, this information can be found in your introduction of your thesis, right? So that's the applicable theory. And then if you have multiple theories, it's rinse, wash, repeat. So here's another theory, gender schema theory. And then you cite the authors who are the originators of the theory, what the theory does, what it claims, and then apply it to your study. Now, when you're doing your presentation, you're going to remove social identity theory. You're going to remove gender schema theory. And you're going to actually put the theories that you introduced in your paper there and explain them. And you may recall in your introduction, you had a paragraph for each theory you're using, and you explained it. Then we shift to reviewing relevant supporting research. Now, when we do this, you're shaping the relevant supporting research around the topic of interest, whatever your topic of interest is. So if you had your 3 research questions, whatever your 3 research questions are, you would put research question 1. So if you were exploring the relationship between one's gender and organizational self-esteem. You would cite 2 to 3 articles on gender and organizational self-esteem. You might cite research that suggests that women are treated differentially in the workforce. There's structural barriers towards advancement or promotion, and that affects overall organizational self-esteem. That you see how you might cite those articles and build a case for that relationship. Gender and job satisfaction, same thing. You have 3 research questions. Obviously, you're not doing gender and job satisfaction. It's whatever your first research question is, whatever your second research question is, whatever your third research question is. And then you share 2 to 3 articles on that. And then knowledge of gender inequity. And I did, by the way, I did this shell with a specific student in mind who did this research with me. So we did a play on words, knowledge of gender equity, and we put in parentheses inequity to highlight where we are in society. For example, did you know that females on average get paid 80 cents on the male dollar? Right? There are certain structural barriers for women in the workforce. So, and then you support this research question with 2 to 3 articles. Then this is where you write your research questions and your hypotheses. You may recall that this was at the very end of your introduction section. Same thing for research question 2. Same thing for research question 3. So by this point, the reader should know what problem you're trying to address, why it's relevant, how you grounded your research in general theories, and then your research questions and hypotheses. Notice in the oral presentation, I'm not asking you to present the gaps in the research, how you're going to fill a void, right? I think it's easier to leave that out, and you could get bogged down in that. So for the purpose of an oral presentation, you don't need to talk about the gaps in the research. Now, proposed participants. Proposed participants, you're going to change from proposed participants to participants, because now you have your actual number of participants, right? And you know the total number, the gender breakdown, the age variability, the ethnic variability, and any other relevant factor. For this person, they were interested in employment status and religious identification and all these different things. But whatever factors you're looking at that are relevant, they should be there, right? Then you move into your instrument section. And in your instrument section, you cite what the instrument is, right? And this comes from your method section. You cite the instrument and then you talk about it. Well, what is the instrument? It's a 10-item instrument that is used to assess the extent to which a person believes himself to provide valuable contribution to an organization, right? So that is a description. Now we use a 5-point Likert scale, and then you talk about reliability estimates like Cronbach's alpha. And you do the same thing for all of them. This is job satisfaction survey. It provides anchors at the end, disagree very much, agree very much. And then you report the Cronbach's alpha. What's interesting when we look at this JSS is that if I were presenting on this particular one, I would say Cronbach's alpha coefficient for each dimension range from 0.45 to 0.74. And I would say that indicates for most cases, adequate reliability, but there were certain dimensions that the alpha was low. So I would talk about what it means to have a 0.45 Cronbach's alpha. To be considered a reliable measure, the Cronbach's alpha should be 0.7 or higher, right? So the fact that this is lower than 0.7 is concerning for whatever dimension that is. And then the knowledge of gender equity scale, right? Again, you cite your authors, you talk about number of items, you talk about how it's scaled, whether it's mean scores or total scores, and then Cronbach's alpha, right? And then your procedure is from A to Z what you did, right? So when you think about data collection in a thesis class, in an experimental class, the first thing you need to do is what before you do data collection?
Get IRB approval?
IRB approval, that's right. Prior to data collection, IRB approval was, or prior to data collection, this study was submitted and approved by the IRB, something to that effect. So you'll notice, even when I'm writing it or speaking it out, I don't always like my language right away, so I change it. So a statement to tell the individuals in the audience that this was IRB approved. Then after IRB approval, you're gonna tell the reader what you did next. In this particular class, what did you do next? You populated the surveys to SurveyMonkey, right? That was your second thing you did. And it's very important to tell the reader that it was SurveyMonkey. Now you're like, well, what's the difference? Because each software program has its own interface. It has its own interface. It has its own appearance. So you want to tell the reader that you use SurveyMonkey, and you linked that survey to Sona Systems, right? Tell the reader that you linked it to Sona Systems, and anyone who successfully completed your survey was granted research credit, right? You're telling the reader that. And then after that, you want to talk about any other way you collected data. For example, some people took the link and put it on their social media accounts and said, please help a struggling student survive experimental psychology, right? You might have said something to that effect, right? So you want to tell the reader that. And then you want to talk about, after you had all your data, what was the next step? Data analysis. So you could say the data was exported to an SBS file, and statistical analysis were conducted using IBM SPSS 25.0. That's a mouthful, so I'll say that again. Data analyses were conducted using IBM SPSS 25.0. And why would I want to know it's 25.0? Well, the answer is simple. I want to know it's 25.0 because I want to know which version of the software program you did, because each version comes with new updates and newer functionality, and it could affect how the data was understood. So then you are going to report your statistical analysis plan. So you're going to restate your research question, what it was. You're going to tell the reader what your independent variables were, your dependent variables were, the statistical test you used. And after you do this PowerPoint slide, you need at least one more PowerPoint slide on research question 1 to actually report what you found. Now, I uploaded another video on how to write results. Did you guys have a chance to see that video? It's about a 50-minute long video,
Yes.
very exciting video about how to write results. That's going to be handy for the slide after, right? So where you actually report your outcomes. And in this particular case, the person was doing an independent samples t-test. Well, then they need to write what they found, right? Another slide on that. Same thing for research question 2. What was the independent variable? What were the dependent variables? What statistical tests you used? What you found? So after framing the research question, you're going to tell the reader why you used the statistical test you did. And then on another slide, now what's missing here is the actual slide where you report your results. So similar to research question 1, where you added a slide talking about your results, you would do the same thing here as well for research question 2. And then research question 3, the same thing, independent variable, dependent variable, the statistical test you used, and why, right? And then you would have another slide, which isn't here, and you would actually provide the results you found. And if you had more than 3 research questions or you had exploratory analyses, it's very important to tell the reader that if you did any additional analysis that was worthwhile, you want to tell the reader how you did that. So this particular study was done last semester, so data was collected both pre-COVID and post-COVID. So she was able to explore whether there was an interaction between gender, COVID, pre versus post, and all of her 3 metrics. And then she had the statistical test and what she found. And then actually there should be another slide here, a slide to talk about your discussion. So I would ask you to add one additional slide that talks about how your results line up with past research. How your results line up with past research. Now, for some of you, your results were non-significant. And it may feel like, man, I did all this work on a thesis and my results were not statistically significant. Non-significant or not statistically significant is not the same as saying insignificant. So you want to talk about, well, why do you feel your results were different than past studies? So you want to have some level of discussion around that, right? And that's for your discussion section. Now, I also uploaded a shell, a lab report shell, which goes through each of the sections so that if you're kind of curious, well, what should be in that discussion section, it's there as well. All right. And later I'm gonna make a video on the different parts of the lab report or paper, and I'm gonna go into detail about the discussion. So, and then you always have a slide that says questions that invites questions from the audience. So that pretty much is the slideshow. Now I'm gonna stop recording and open it up.